Hello, I'm David Eames, and welcome to the On Your Mind podcast. As usual, I'm joined by the lovely Owen and Mikey, and today we're going to be talking about meaninglessness. That sounds a bit of a tricky one. Well, last time we spoke about existential freedom, and there are 4 existential givens. So you've got freedom, mortality, isolation, and the one I want to talk about today is meaninglessness. The idea that in a post-religious society, where does meaning come from? Owen, where does meaning come from for you?
I suppose it's whatever it's attached to certain stuff, isn't it? I think a lot of things are hardwired from when you're young, that things are given meaning. Does that make sense? I know I'm not explaining it clearly enough, but for me, I've got certain things that I hold on a pedestal, or that are so important to me that is my meaning, like family and all that sort of thing. That the reason I get up, that I go to work, that I do what I do is to provide, but it's because of the people that it impacts and affects. But I don't know if that's exactly what you mean.
I don't know what I mean. It much as that what we'll come to is it's for each of us to find it. Mikey, what do you think?
I suppose meaning for me is attached to sort of purpose, putting purpose into what I do. Because it's a big question, isn't it, that everyone asks, what's the meaning of life? And I don't think life does have a meaning. You have to make it have a meaning and give it a meaning. So when I go on my endeavours with the business, with my family, whatever I'm doing, I try and put that into it and I give it purpose. So again, for me, it's being in enjoyment and try and make it playful and make it... I was going to go back to enjoyment, I just said it, but try and turn it into something that I want to do in all engagement. Does that make sense?
Well, I think so. Well, okay, I'm not...
we're going back to Dave on this. We're like, help us out here.
Please validate my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's something that we maybe don't pay enough attention to in the modern world, is that our meaning might come from things that aren't that meaningful, about material things and about material success. But when people are on their deathbed, they don't tend to say, I wish I'd spent more time at work.
Yeah.
Because I can attest to that. I had, at one stage in my life when I was 15, 16, a lot of meaning into commercialism, into materials. And that to me meant status, I suppose. It meant I looked good. People would accept me for that. So that meaning was really important to me. But then as I grew on and maybe matured a little bit, and I realised I had to work X amount to acquire all this, that started to fade in its meaning. I was like, well, why do I want this status anyway? Why do I care what people think? So my meaning began to change.
I think that is driven a lot as well by your age, maturity, and especially with school. School, it's a minefield, because I use this as an example quite a lot when I'm trying to explain to people a similar thing. Like, there were things that when you were at school you would yearn for, and same as you, and my era, if you like, was say 92 to 97, and kickers, the shoes kickers they were the bee's knees. All the cool kids have them, and I couldn't get them, couldn't afford them. I never had a pair. And so it's one of those things that if you can take yourself back to that time and remember how much that meant to you, and it was above and beyond anything else, the most important thing, and you go back now and someone says, do you want me to get you a pair of kickers? You literally wouldn't even care. It wouldn't matter. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you were wrong at the time. Same as like with my daughter at the minute being 14 and she wants X, Y, or Z. It's strange. She's not anywhere near as materialistic as I was. But it's one of those things that it's strange how things are so important, but it's just because it's directed by a certain group or a crowd or a feeling of acceptance or being a part of the tribe, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I know what you're saying, but I also know that our brains at that time were definitely not developed to anywhere near what they are now. But I do find myself being sucked into the same, even as sad as it sounds, being a 41-year-old man, I'm replacing all my tools with Milwaukee tools. And for whatever reason, I'm convincing myself the reason that my jobs are getting better is because I've got a better tool, which sometimes is true, but at the same time, it doesn't justify £300 for a saw when I can get one for £100. Do you know what I mean? But it's strange how you sort of fine-tune your meaning to what you want, as opposed to when you're at school, it's a tribal thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, meaning, as I said at the outset, it's got to come from where you choose it to come from.
Yeah.
But it's about trying to. What I want to encourage for people is to think about it, spend a bit of time with it. That my counselling hero is a guy called Irvin Yalom. He was one of those who helped to develop existential therapy. He's in his 90s now, lives in California. He only sees clients for single sessions because his memory isn't up to doing more than that. And he often works with, or has for a long time worked with people towards the end of their life. They might have been in a hospice or something like that. And he said that the number of people that he come across that only learnt how to live when they knew they were dying.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what I want to do with this, in a way, is encourage you, don't wait till then.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
Definitely
The sooner you can plug into that, the better.
Yeah, I think the minute that you can make peace with who you are and what you are, and I'm not saying about doing anything bad or being a bad person intentionally, but once you're at peace with who you are, it dials down, especially for me, and I know we've spoken about this on other podcasts and how you are either perceived by people or how you want to be perceived by people. It can be a big part of your meaning as such, because, for example, when I was talking to Mikey before about meeting Joe Rogan, the commentator for UFC, used to do Fear Factor. Without me even thinking about it, I was almost trying to justify my existence to this man because I wanted him as part of my life, because I admired him for what he did and I respected him. But I kind of needed to fast forward a friendship 10 years. So I tried to cram all this justification of shit. I'm going, I did this and this and this, and I've been watching your stuff since this. And ultimately,
I've done that.
I will never have the friendship with Joe Rogan that I've got with other people that I don't put the same sort of impetus on, which is insane because they mean more to me when I actually think about it. Because Joe Rogan's not going to ring me if I need to pay my mortgage, or he's not going to come to my birthday party or whatever, because he doesn't know me. But I have got people that do know me and care about me and all the rest of it. And it was just kind of, I had to slap myself in the face a little bit and say, dude, like, don't get me wrong, you don't have to be rude to this guy, and you can have an interaction with him and he can remember you if he wants or not. But it's more important that you're aware of what you've got and how lucky you are, fortunate you are within any circumstance. And I mean, one of the biggest ones for me, because I often mention this, and I know I've said it to my kids in the past, I often see interacting with people can sometimes be like a currency. So if you realise that some people are just wasting your time, they are, that's how they are, and that's fine, that's their prerogative. But if you can see it as a currency and you're wasting time or money or energy or whatever it is, then the minute that someone lets themselves know or they show how they are to you organically, and you can make that decision, you go, I don't need to invest that time or money into you anymore. Because, like, a big one is when people don't remember certain things that we've been through together, or remember your kids' names or something. Or I've worked for someone before and he couldn't remember my wife's name. I worked there 5 years, couldn't remember my wife's name. I'm like, why do I feel guilty about leaving your business? It's a nice thing that makes it easy, but the meaning's always shifting. And I think the older you get, and that's why a lot of people on their deathbeds come to that conclusion of, why did I give a shit? Why was I so bothered? And I don't mean that you just go and start hitting people or acting like an uncontrollable maniac, but it does make you think a lot clearer about making the right choices or what you want to do.
Because rather than wishing they spent more time with at work, people wish they spent more time with their family.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, quite a few of my clients, they can be divorced men, and they only really learn how to love their children after they no longer had 24-hour access to them.
Yeah.
And that's when they really started missing them.
Yeah.
And learn how to become a dad in some ways. That's not the case for all men, of course.
No.
But, that unless we're going to lose something, sometimes we don't know the value of it. So how about we spend a bit of time figuring out what's really valuable in our lives? And I think, that value, that meaning can come from many things. I I think there could be the meaning in art or a good movie or a painting, but at the heart of it, it's the relationships which are the deepest.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing these sessions, not so much the talking, because I enjoy spending time with you guys.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, cheers, mate.
we've got a nice relationship.
Yeah.
And that is real value to me. I enjoy, my work is meaningful because I'm interacting with people on a deep level, and that means a lot to me. I'm very lucky in that respect. It's not given to everyone.
I suppose that development, and when they're on the deathbed and they think, I would have liked to spend more time with the people that I care about and family, is because they've had that amount of development with certain people. Because I had a really bad spell of nihilism and meaninglessness. I went through more or less an identity crisis. If you got time for hold space for a little story, I was
Go for it.
Thank you. I must have been about 17 or 18, and I'd sort of tried to live that archetypal life of what you're told to do. You go to school, you try and get your grades. I didn't do very well. Then you go and get a job. And then I got into this cycle, and I really got to a breaking point in life where I had a girlfriend, I had the job, I had everything where it should have been, quote unquote. And I was on this timetable that I just couldn't even keep up with. It was go from there, need to get to girlfriend's house to see her, need to go boxing training. I was on this loop, and eventually I just had a massive breakdown. I've had a few breakdowns in my life. I'm quite a sensitive soul, but this was quite a big one. And I was just shouting at the top of like, what is the point? What is the point of all of this? I'm not happy. I don't want to do it. And I've not got a great relationship with my family. So I don't think there would have been, I wish I'd spend more time with them because we didn't have that connection. So I'm just thinking how for sort of, say, somebody a bit younger who maybe doesn't have that relationship with family or close ones or friends and them connections, how they can find meaning, how they can find purpose, how they can find the zest for life when it does feel so hollow and flat.
It's tricky because, you know, circumstantially, it's not always available for people.
Yeah.
When I say family as well, I mean that in a wider sense of how we define family are. You know,
I like that.
You guys are family.
Yeah. I really like that.
Well,
yeah.
I was going to use Brassic as an example. I know we just mentioned Brassic, and obviously massive TV show, phenomenon, incredible. And it's one of them, with having my own personal family issues where I haven't spoken to my mum for such a long time, the overwhelming thing that people say is, oh, you can't undo that, you've got to go back. And it's one of them where, what's the definition of stupidity? Is it doing something once and expecting it, or doing something 100 times and expecting it to be changed? Insanity.
Yeah,
So
100 times. Maybe like 5 is
either way. and as much as I've had so many people that feel like they're saying the right thing, like distant relatives or people that I bump into that, oh no, you should try, and they don't know the ins and outs. Whereas other people who will say to you, no, it's all right, you do what you need to do. And I think like someone like Dan that I've been working with for 4 years, that fundamentally has my family as his my family is his driving force that he knows is important to me. Like the day he offered my job, he waited till Stacey was in and asked Stacey if it would be okay, because he knew that it was going to rock the boat a little bit financially and all the rest of it, which to me, that carried a million miles. But it's okay that they're not necessarily blood relatives, because there's things I come to you for that I wouldn't go to my dad for. But I think knowing that that's okay, and especially with something like Brassic, because when you can apply comedy to something, it doesn't matter what you're going through. If you can relate to something that someone is doing, like Brassic is a exaggeration of reality for most people, but it's still there, it's still true, and it can still be happening to the majority of people. Like we made our eldest watch Big Mouth. We didn't make her watch it, but it's like it's a cartoon series about kids coming of age. And the thing is, we didn't want to have to sit down and have the birds and the bees, because she's 14, she's not stupid. And at the time, it was a lockdown, it was very difficult. She was struggling because she didn't have her friends to bounce off. And it was, I mean, for anyone to experience that was horrible. But once she didn't want to watch it with us because it would have been cringe. But for her to watch that completely changed the perspective of everything. Because there was a character in it that was experiencing X, another one experiencing Y, another one experiencing Z. And the minute that she came to terms with that, oh, this is normal. Oh, okay. Like the whole flappiness and clusterfuck of life just sort of simmered a little bit to the point where she was like, okay. And it was night and day. And I'm not saying that I was a genius for suggesting it, but I took a lot from it, because I wasn't academic like Mikey, and I'm not the most, I don't know, I've got intermittent Tourette's at times, but some people will look at that as a bad thing and like not understand how I interact with people. But the people that get it really get it. And when she got that, it was just a massive tick for me that we did something right. And it's one of them that it's all right to feel a certain way, but sometimes there is something out there that you wouldn't normally think. It's not like a documentary or a doctor telling you how to feel, or a medicine. It's just a digital medicine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, meaninglessness is inherent in our world. If we don't believe in God anymore, and many people don't, or they don't have a specific idea of what that is, they might have some vague notion that there must be something after this, because it's really difficult to think of the world existing without you in it. Yeah. Because it only exists through the way we perceive it. But let's just think, well, maybe this is all there is. Then that's kind of absurd, isn't it? That everything we are is just going to disappear. Yeah. And that over time, everything that we leave behind is going to disappear. No trace is going to be left. So all that matters is what we have right now.
Yeah, I mean, one big question is, and Stacey always used to refer to this, because we used to have a briefcase. She would, photos, memories are the biggest things. And the meaning of life, when you mentioned that the other day to me, the meaning of life is making memories. Because a lot of the time you're making the memory, you're not in the moment, that you can remember it better when you see it afterwards, if that makes sense, from the photo or the footage or whatever. So for her, it was always super important to have a backup of our photos, or a backup of a backup of a backup, to make sure. And she said, if there was ever a fire, that's the first thing I'd grab. And that's kind of our meaning. That is absolutely our meaning. Locked up in that case is everything that we've ever done and been through, and all the rest of it. All the good stuff especially. But I think that's why we take, like, family heirlooms. I've got a ring off my granddad. It was actually not even my granddad. It was a fella that met my dad and took him under his wing, and really the best man on the planet ever to have lived. He was a hero. And I had his ring, and I've still got it. And it actually snapped, so I don't wear it anymore. But it's in a box, and it's probably one of the most important things to me. That and a tea mug that the kids made me, which sounds nothing, but that holds all that meaning, because like you said, once we've gone, we've gone. And there's kind of no stopping that. Eventually the mug will go and the ring will go and it'll be lost, but it's what's important to you at the time, I suppose.
About 30 years ago, my best friend Bill, at that time, he was 70 at the time. He knew he was dying of mesothelioma, asbestosis. And during that last year of his life, he and I had a few days out, and we went to Kedleston Park, we went to Cork Abbey, we went around a few art galleries, and to try and actually, I was on a bit of a mission to tell him that everything that he'd ever learnt was wrong, which is maybe not that good.
Nice one.
Just before you go.
Cheers, David. Yeah.
But actually, just to have a different perspective on things. So we went to the Joseph Wright Gallery in Derby, and I think maybe perhaps for the first time in his life, he'd sat in front of a painting and start to engage with it, rather than just look at it, but to try and think, what's the artist trying to show? How's he trying to show it? And to be with him when he developed that new perspective was of immense value. Now, I haven't got any photographs or physical mementos of that time, but I've got very, very cherished memories of that last year of his life and those times that we spent together. It was taking the time to do something different. And we also did jobs together, like he got a canal boat, and we lined that all out with oak, and we spent a few weeks doing that together. Men working together, doing something like that. It's tremendous bonding exercise.
That feels really meaningful when you say that. Yeah, I can
That's
imagine
what I mean. His meaning doesn't come from, there's not a menu
Yeah.
It's about the meaning is
It's what you
there
take
if you're
from it.
looking for it.
Yeah.
I do, with the absence of God now and people not really having a belief pattern and a manual to life and a way of living, I do wonder what makes people think of being good to one another. Because if they've got this YOLO, you only live once, I'm just going to be good for me sort of attitude, that can start to infringe on other people's life very quickly if they just all become narcissistic and all about self and living for that way.
But you can also take that YOLO view, and I want to get the best for myself by seeing that's through my interaction with others.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's down to the values that we have, and in a way, we're not really responsible for our own values, because where did you get them from? You kind of get them accidentally from your environment.
Yeah,
agreements that you've made with other people.
Yeah. So those values about, but for the majority of people, it feels good pleasing other people.
I agree with that.
Not for everyone, and some people, and I think it's often because they've been damaged and badly treated themselves, they don't necessarily have that instinct. But for the majority of people, it's about pleasing other people. But how about this? Concentrate on the pleasure that gives you, rather than thinking, "Oh, other people are going to think well of me for doing that."
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's the act rather than the Facebook post to let people know you've done the act. And I think, as much as because I don't believe in God, I'm not particularly religious at all, but I think because there is the absolute unknown of everything, even though people could go down the route of going and kicking 10 ducks into a river, something you just never know.
Innate inside.
Yeah, you just never know, and you it's how you can live with yourself, how you sleep at night, and how you get through the day. Does that make sense? Because as much as we've had this massive narrative of a story of a man that did this and this and this, and when you get there, everything's going to be okay. As much as that sounds insane, it's one of those things that people, because it's not a definite, because they can't absolutely say, well, it's definitely not going to happen, or it definitely is going to happen. I think that's what will drive certain people certain ways. But the fundamental damage that can happen to a person before they're 10, 12 is terrifying, of how much impact that can have on how they interact with people. Because I will talk to anyone, and I will always try and find a common ground with anyone. But I have found people in the past where they've been let down so much, because when anyone's a child, regardless of how old they are or whatever it is, what age group, when they're small, someone else is responsible for them. And for someone to let them down that much, you're ruining potentially the next 80, 70 year, whatever it is. And that's kind of, it's heartbreaking when you've not necessarily experienced it, but you can see that someone else is going through it. Do you know what I mean? And I think the fundamental good of what people can do will always outweigh, if you know what I mean.
Some of my clients I've worked with, they had childhood experiences where I'm amazed that they're still here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That life has been so terrible, but there's hope shines through, that with the right help, that the people can. Well, they don't get fixed, but they can find a different way of living with things.
Yeah.
And it's that things don't always have to be defined by trauma.
Yeah.
And maybe in some ways that trauma can become meaningful for them and be applied to helping others if they find a way through it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that everyone is of equal value. Not necessarily to me, but in intrinsic terms. So when I work with clients, I always tell them I'm going to accept them unconditionally. I'm not going to judge them, which makes me sound like a saint. And you boys will say, that's not true. I'm pretty far from that. But when people tell you who they are, which they do in a therapy session, you can't judge them.
No.
When you really have an encounter with people, then you connect.
Yeah.
And again, this is a thing I think we can bring this more into our everyday lives, is that rather than just being always superficial, how do we actually connect with other people so we can accept them and understand who they really are?
Well, that's one of the biggest things that I really struggle with, stuff like racism, sexism and all the rest of it. Because, just a really quick example, when Stacey went into labour with Moo, it was a 23-hour labour. It was really, really traumatic for everyone. But then she had to come out the sunroof after about 23, 24 hours. But one of the nurses was black, one of them was Polish, there was a French doctor, and all the rest of it. And they saved my wife and they saved my baby. So whatever colour they were or wherever they were from kind of didn't matter. And that's what blows my mind, because it's more important that it's all equal value. I was listening to, I was on Twitter earlier, and there's a news show, and basically a woman had rang up because there's a lot of things in the news about the Queen's obviously passed away, and Harry and Meghan were holding hands briefly, and she rang up to sort of say, yeah, well, it's part of the ceremony, it's this and it's this, and I was like, you taking time out to ring someone to let them know how annoyed you are they decided to hold hands, like regardless of what Meghan's been through, what Harry's been through, all the rest of it, the fact that the massive funeral, that the last time it happened was his mum when he was 10. So it's all kind of trauma. He's also made the decision to leave and all the rest of it, but he's still got people, and it probably comes down to race or whatever it is, but these people that are finding fault to pick with someone that decided at his grandma's funeral she held his hand. And part of me was going to retweet it to say, and be kind of like just really derogatory towards this person.
Yeah.
But I did no, and I couldn't bring myself to do it, because it was one of the things I was like, look, this, I'm only adding to the negative shit. But in my opinion, it's just, I think it bothers me more that people have got this sort of time and freedom to be able to go, that's stupid.
But a different way of looking at it is that is someone that's evidencing their own damage.
Yeah, exactly. Which it won't help me. Then I'm not going to bring any attention to her, but me reinforcing negativity with negativity isn't going to do anything. I kind of had to take it in and go, really?
Yeah.
And then I have to remove myself from that, because my opinion on the whole thing is, if you want to hold hands, you can hold hands. That's fine. Like if someone goes, yes, but it's regal and it's really this and it's part of the ponce and this and that, and it's like, well, that's stupid. That's insane. That's not a thing. That's not okay. Like, it's like with the gun laws in America. You know, when they were made 1 million years ago, when it was a musket and a rifle, and they go, well, we have the right to bear arms. You go, well, when you made the rules, it's different to what the rules are now. Do you know what I mean? So it just annoys me that logic is just thrown out of everything when it's been written in a book however many years ago.
I was just going to give to that. I think it sort of coincides with what you're saying, is when I was struggling with meaning, and I'd not really been given a very good blueprint for life and an idea of how to sort of conduct myself, I had to build up a moral compass. And the sort of person I am, I like things very simple. I'm going to simplify things as best as possible. And I've sort of condensed my moral compass down to, does this bring me lightness or does this bring me heaviness? And how do I feel from that? And I've given myself like a mission statement now to when I'm making decisions and choices. And my mission statement is lighting up paths. That's what I want to do for myself and I want to do for others, is like, if I can bring us guys together and do this podcast, it's lighting a path. We don't know who's listening to this. Their paths are going to get lighter, and doing cool stuff for myself. So that's lighting my path. And that's kind of maybe an idea for people, is boil down who you are, what your compass is, and then give yourself a bit of a statement for life of how you want to live it. So when you're making a decision there, do I get involved in this Twitter argument? I'd be able to reflect back to my mission statement there and say, I'm not lighting up my own path, I'm not lighting up their path, and I'm not lighting up any paths around there by getting engaging with it. So sometimes it is nice to have something you can reflect back to for yourself and go, no, this doesn't align with me.
Well, that's where your meaning is coming from, living in line with your values.
Mm.
And again, I think that's sometimes where the meaninglessness can creep in.
Yeah.
Where we're maybe not aware of what the values are, and we're not living according to them. And it's, you take people, racism, sexism, these people are evil. Racists are not bad people. They may be uneducated, ignorant, whatever it comes from. They've been exposed to the wrong information.
Yeah.
Mm.
And, because what do you hear before a racist comment? I'm not racist, but
yeah.
Because no one thinks of themselves as being racist. No. But we all have these biases as well. We all have unconscious bias. We all have things that we believe that we've never really examined. So I think this is part of the meaning as well of that self-examination. I think I might have said it on before on this. It's not a new idea. On the temple at Delphi in ancient Greece, it said, know yourself. And this is an absolute key. So it's that if I'm going to find meaning in life, then I need to know what things mean to me. And then try and live according to them. Not all the time either. But it's having those moments, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because every moment, we're never getting back again.
No.
It's all just blowing in the wind. We're tiny little specks in a vast universe.
Yeah.
I think these are the good conversations to be able to reflect to, though, and give yourself them gentle reminders to be able to go, for the last week or so, have I just been in pilot mode and completely not been present and living congruent to what I've set out to do? So it's good to have check-ins with yourself as much as you can, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's also all right to be guilty of
Yeah.
autopilot.
It's just then catching yourself, isn't it?
Of course. Because the thing is, and especially with this sort of thing, it's difficult to promote or project that everything's perfect. Everything's not perfect. It's not perfect for me. I know it's not perfect for you. It's not perfect for you. But it's how hard you work towards trying to make everything good as you can.
Do your best.
Exactly. And it's like, we're talking about school again. I mean, it's a big thing at our house at the minute because obviously we're in year 10. It's options. And one of the kids bursts out into tears if he gets anything less than an A+. Or whatever it is now. It's a weird scoring system. She'll get home and go, I got a 3-4, 22 triangle. I'm like, what the fuck is that? I don't know. But I can relate it to a mark, and he's crying. And I think there's so much pressure, on all this pressure, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And the thing is, if you feel it's working now, that, in my opinion, it feels like it'll be pushing away in a relationship further down the line or something. It's not always the best policy just to follow what has been done before and before and before and before. Even on the royal thing, Harry was on an interview saying that Charles had said to him, well, it was terrible for me, it's going to be terrible for you.
Yeah, I watched
And he was like, no.
That was a great interview.
Absolutely
That
not.
was brilliant what he said.
Like, that almost makes me angry to the point where it's like, well, this is what we've got. And
well, that's like generational trauma, isn't it?
Without a doubt. And it's like, you go back 10, 15 years, we didn't have broadband for everyone at the price we've got it now that was free. Like, you try and go on your phone back in the day, 20 years, 10, 15 years ago, you'd have to remortgage. It was insane. Whereas now everyone's got access to so much stuff, and we can all be more, we can be closer, and things can be worked out. And this is what I was saying about logic. That's now the King of England's logic to his children.
Yeah.
I mean, what regrets is he going to have on his deathbed? Do you know what I mean? There's certain elements that you're just like, dude, to me, just because someone said that's what you should do, and again, 1,000 years ago, isn't relevant now. It's more frustrating that, especially when people like that are making big decisions that impact a lot of us, it can be more frustrating. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just, things can change. Like, nothing is set in stone. Things are movable.
Yeah, I'd like to outlaw the word should or need to.
Okay.
Because whenever we say I should do something, what we're saying is I'm not going to do something.
I'm aware
but I'm going to feel guilty for not doing it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I work on a lot of this with my clients. It's a little bit like the Yoda thing. There is no try.
Yes.
You know, but there is a try. There's do or don't do or try to do.
Yeah.
But should do or need to do.
I like
exclude those.
Yeah.
I had a similar thing when I was doing a lot of graphic.
I have to do that. That puts a lot of pressure on you.
Big difference.
I was speaking back to what we did in our last session about freedom. No, you don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, you make that choice.
You choose to or choose not to.
Or I want to.
Yeah.
That gives you the power back.
Because when I was doing a lot of websites and graphic design, I used to get a lot of can you just. Oh, can you just change everything? And it's like, when you're an independent and you're starting out and you're not so sure how to work with people, it's very difficult. And I can remember sitting down with a couple of clients and I'd say, if you can ask me for any of these updates without using the word just, I'll do them for free. And within seconds, they go, just Photoshop, just change, just make it blue. And I was like, okay, this isn't going to work, is it? This is going to be really expensive. And again, because of you explained to me with the word should, it opens that whole world to like, oh my God. And I've even realised how insane that is, that it is always it's almost like a bookmarking something. It's never a definite.
See, and I know through your work, Owen, that you get meanings from that.
Yeah, massively.
Because you really enjoy doing a good job.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And that gives you a great deal of satisfaction, and that's a really valid source of meaning. So it's this whole thing about making the choices to do things in a meaningful way to derive the benefit that we get from that sense of a job well done.
Yeah.
Being in the moment, it really touches on that.
Yeah.
Again, that touches on the mortality and it breaks isolation.
Yeah. But I think it's breaking moulds as often as you can. I know people will try and text or email nowadays more so than phoning. And obviously, with me being a small independent, there are certain things that change within my industry. And for example, when Dan was on the road, I would be taking him clothes. And if I was an idiot and I'd forget to take them out of stock, someone might buy them clothes. And then someone would buy them and I'd get the order, but like, oh, I've got to ring this person. But I quite look forward to it because I can interact with someone that's found something that I've made and I can have a nice conversation with them. But it always turned out really positive. There's not really been any complaints or returns or bad experiences because I want to speak to you. I want to see who you are, what you're about. Why did you buy my T-shirt? Why are you into this? And because I can do that, I've literally just had a lady that I've been trying to get in touch with for a few weeks, and she's put an order in for her husband, and it's for Christmas. So I can relate to that because my wife's really organised. I'm not. She is. So I know automatically she's a really loving, doting, caring wife that's gone out to get this thing for a partner. And it's just one of those things that before you know it now, I'll always say, keep my number, get in touch if you want anything. And yeah, it can't be done on every scale. Not everyone can do that. But I feel very fortunate that I can interact with the majority of people I work with. And I also remember whatever we've done. I've had a guy that come up to me at a show once, and I told him exactly what his first order was, his second order, and he was just blown away. But it's not doing it to take any credit. It was just because it meant something to me.
Being engaged.
Without a doubt.
And the last thing, I got like 2 practical ideas that I did at a school with some students. And one of them was I literally printed off values, but I got 100 values on a piece of paper. And then we just went through and picked 10 that really resonated with us and some of the words that seemed to matter to us. And then we condensed it down to 5. And then eventually we condensed it down to 3. And they're your 3 most important values to you. And that helped us a little bit to the next activity, which was then, and what do you want? I asked was a big arbitrary question, which we struggled with. But what we found quite easy was, what don't you want in life? And then when we were picking out, well, I don't want to be treated disrespectfully. I don't want to be hurting people's, but whatever it was. And that started opening up to, okay, so the opposite of that is that. So they were just 2 little practical things that I think people could potentially do that might lead them a bit closer towards what their meaning might want to be.
Yeah, what they want their meaning to be. So I think I want to wrap things up now. It might have felt a bit rambling today, talking about life having no meaning. I suppose that's inevitable. But the thing is, it's not that life has no meaning. It's not supplied for us. It's for each of us to find it. And that's what I really want to encourage everyone to do. You only come this way once, so think about it and get the most you can out of it. And enjoy it. Enjoy the moment. Connect.